What about the Delta smelt?
Back to the water issues. Yeah. Well, Berkeley has a piece on this. I don't know so much about the Delta smelt, but I do know that Berkeley says you can conduct what's called hatch and release, not to be confused with catch and release, like catch and release illegal immigrants or catch and release fish. Go fishing. This is hatch and release, where you actually just in a lab or whatever, you hatch a bunch of Delta smelt and you're like, here you go. And you replenish the populations. What happens with the Delta smelt is when you build a dam or you divert water and there's not enough water flow coming into the Delta, the argument is that you're killing fish populations. But look, every action has a reaction. So yes, in nature, when something changes, or even when a geography naturally shifts, when there's an earthquake and a new river is formed, well, duh, some habitats are going to get destroyed, but others will be created. It's not like the new rivers or canals or whatever that are formed are all of a sudden going to be devoid of fish or wildlife or whatever. But because a species that is deemed endangered, the Delta smelt, or a protected species, environmentalists have been able to fight and drag on litigation that prevents the establishment of basins, canals, or dams to enable more water flow to Southern California, which then enhances wildfire risk in Southern California or reduces wildfire mitigation. And hence, we get Los Angeles basically burning down because of a fish that we could hatch and release. But because of that fish, I honestly don't even think the environmentalists care about the fish. Because of that, they are able to fight in courts and prevent development.
So let me tell you my understanding with this, because I did a lot of because I love fish.
Yeah.
So this is
you have a beautiful fish tank, by the way.
I really appreciate that. So the Delta smelt has a lifespan of about 1 year. And because of that, it's seen as a bit of a canary in a coal mine, so to speak. If there's an issue with the ecological habitat in that area, you see it first in the Delta smelt. There's about 7 or 8 different species of fish that live there, where environmentalists say, hey, if it's not the Delta smelt, it's going to be any one of these other things. It just happens to be the Delta smelt because that's a very short lifespan, so we look to that. What's interesting about the Delta smelt is that it thrives with a salinity of 0.2, basically. So it's when the fresh water mixes with salt water, it's got to be just the right combination for this fish to live. And so if you drain too much water from that, there's too much salt that goes in. But now, in a way, it almost helps farmers to make sure there's not too much salt that's going into their crops. So there needs to be that area in between where this fish could live. So they're saying that they could tie this up as long as they want to, not because of the smelt, but because there's a whole bunch of endangered species. But that even if the Delta smelt weren't there, that wouldn't have prevented anything going on. Los Angeles still gets the vast majority of its water from the Sierra Nevada and from groundwater, and that this Delta smelt water mostly goes to help farmers in Central California. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah. So let's break that down. First, the argument specifically on the Delta smelt is a perfect example of what we call the slippery slope fallacy, which is let's start with the smallest problem, and then let's assume that problem continues 5 iterations further. And then let's argue the worst case scenario. All the fish are dead. Okay, so let's go through the thought experiment. Kill every living animal in the San Joaquin Sacramento River Delta. Just kill all of them. Okay, they're all dead now. So what do? Well, now you can divert as much water as you want. There's no risk to life anymore because you've killed them all. Okay, so what do you have now? Well, now you have a Colorado River that's potentially filled up, canals that are filled up, dams and reservoirs that are filled up. And then you have to ask yourself, at what point are you investing in protecting Southern California from losing, as you mentioned earlier, $120 billion potentially in economic damage, which is like 0.4% of the entire United States GDP that you just literally lit on fire, which is bad. That's a loss. It's a net loss to society. At what point do you say, wow, you know what? Kill all the living organisms in that delta to prevent even half of that from happening. Because if you prevent half of it from happening, then you have $60 extra billion. So what if now we take a slice of that and now you build new estuaries or, larger pools or ponds or lakes or whatever, and you let this fish that would have been endangered or died there or whatever live there, right? So basically relocate the fish or the animal and animals. That can all be done with money. And that's to say that a small investment into water infrastructure can save hundreds of billions of dollars, as we're seeing now, but it could also save human lives. And that's really important too. So unfortunately, the desire for saving these fish, which we can save in another way, as the liberal institution Berkeley says, we can save the Delta smelt in another way. There is no shortage, by the way, of salmon, okay? We can save salmon in another way. Then we should really start thinking about bettering California's infrastructure and saving lives and saving hundreds of billions of dollars.
Now, with the Delta smelt, separate from that, I do find it interesting that they do surveys and they see how many smelt are in this area. The last time they did the survey, they could only find one.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so regardless of this, it seems like rising temperatures are killing them off. And so either way,
it's kind of like feeble,
Well, that's the thing.
If I was going to say they live 1 year, they die from.
But that's
a good point. That's a really good point.
But that's how they become an indicator species for the entire area because of such a short lifespan.
Yeah.
You know very quickly if something's up, and that affects everything else. So it could balloon from that to other fish, to other salmon, to other birds, to eat the fish, to like this.
Which is where the argument is that at some point you have to make the decision at what point is hundreds of billions of dollars of harm to GDP, which we could reinvest to saving more fish lives and human lives and property, right?
Yeah.
Where's the balance there?
It's just a prioritization.
Well, so far it seems like for California, the balance is if something goes extinct because of human life, it's California's responsibility to at least keep the lineage going. And so you do have some of these fish and some of these insects and things like this that are still going in captivity.
Sure. And fine. Great. If that could save lives, give them a paradise. Give them the bigliest, largest paradise pool reservoir ever, all for the Delta smelt. They could have the greatest population ever in the world. Build a museum around the Delta smelt. There's so much that money can do to solve these issues. But unfortunately, I mean, look, regarding indicator species, it's very interesting. There's a reason we use mice for drug discovery and research because obviously if a rat is going to get cancer from pumping them up with 10 times the normal human dose of a certain drug, well, then maybe there's a risk of cancer in a human. Or at least once you spread it out over population, a higher incidence of cancer by using a certain drug. So yeah, the idea of something being an indicator species exists. It's, again, same reason we use mice. But that doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to see all of the externalities of all humans getting cancer if some of the small indicators come up in mice. Same thing with the smelt. Doesn't mean that all of the other ones are going to die. Save the smelt, put them in captivity. Save Southern California.
Jackson indicator species, actually.
Oh,